Our story begins in the ancient kingdom of Persia, where the Jewish people lived as exiles under the rule of King Xerxes. Among them was a young and beautiful woman named Esther, who would rise to a position of great influence and courageously save her people from destruction. In the citadel of Susa, King Xerxes held a grand banquet lasting 180 days, showcasing his kingdom's wealth and splendor. At the end of this period, he hosted a 7-day feast for all the people. On the 7th day, in high spirits from wine, King Xerxes commanded Queen Vashti to appear before him to display her beauty. But Queen Vashti refused, enraging the king. Following his advisor's advice, Xerxes deposed of Vashti, stripping her of her title as queen. To find a new queen, a search was conducted across the empire for the most beautiful young virgins. They were brought into the king's harem under the care of Haggai, the king's eunuch in charge of the women. Among these women was Esther, also known as Hadassah, an orphan raised by her cousin Mordecai. Mordecai instructed Esther not to reveal her nationality and family background. Shh. After a year of beauty treatments, each young woman would go to King Xerxes. When Esther's turn came, she won the favor of everyone who saw her, including the king. Xerxes was so taken with Esther's beauty and grace that he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Esther kept her Jewish identity a secret, as Mordecai had advised. Meanwhile, Mordecai, who sat at the king's gate, overheard a plot to assassinate King Xerxes. 2 of the king's officers, Bigthana and Teresh, conspired to kill the king. Mordecai told Queen Esther about the plot, and she reported it to the king, giving credit to Mordecai. The matter was investigated, found to be true, and the 2 officials were hanged. This was recorded in the book of the Annals in the presence of the king. An Agagite named Haman was elevated by King Xerxes to the highest position of authority above all the other nobles. All the royal officials at the king's gate knelt down and paid honor to Haman, as the king had commanded. But Mordecai refused to bow down or pay him honor. Haman was filled with rage and sought to destroy not only Mordecai, but all of Mordecai's people, the Jews, throughout the kingdom of Xerxes. To determine the most favorable day to carry out his plan, Haman cast the lot, called Pur in Hebrew, and it fell on the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar. Haman went to King Xerxes and said, "There is a certain people dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom, who keep themselves separate. Their customs are different from those of all other people, and they do not obey the king's laws. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. If it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to get rid of them, and I will put 10,000 talents of silver into the royal treasury." The king took his signet ring from his finger and gave it to Haman to seal the decree. The decree went out by couriers to all the king's provinces, with the order to kill all the Jews, young and old, women and children, on a single day, the 13th day of the 12th month, and to plunder their goods and steal it. The city of Susa was bewildered, but the king and Haman sat down to drink. When Mordecai learned of the decree, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went into the city, wailing loudly and bitterly. In every province to which the king's edict came, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing. Esther's maids and eunuchs came and told her about Mordecai. Distressed, she sent clothes for him to put on, but he would not accept them. Then Esther summoned Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs assigned to attend her, and ordered him to find out what was troubling Mordecai, and why. Mordecai told him everything, including the amount of money Haman had promised to pay into the royal treasury for the destruction of the Jews. He also gave him a copy of the edict for their annihilation to show to Esther, and urged her to go into the king's presence to beg for mercy and plead with him for her people. Hathach went back and reported to Esther what Mordecai had said. Then she instructed him to say to Mordecai, "All the king's officials and the people of the royal provinces know that for any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, the king has but one law, that they be put to death unless the king extends the gold scepter to them." When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer: "Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai: "Go, gather together all the Jews who are in Susa, and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish." On the 3rd day, Esther donned her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the palace, in front of the king's hall. When King Xerxes saw her, he was pleased and extended his golden scepter, sparing her life. "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it will be given you." Esther invited the king and Haman to a banquet she had prepared. During the banquet, the king asked Esther what she desired. Esther invited the king and Haman to another banquet the next day, where she would reveal her petition. Haman went out happy and in high spirits, but when he saw Mordecai at the king's gate, and observed that he neither rose nor showed fear in his presence, he was filled with rage. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home. Calling together his friends and Zeresh, his wife, Haman boasted to them about his vast wealth, his many sons, and all the ways the king had honored him. "And that's not all," Haman added. "I'm the only person Queen Esther invited to accompany the king to the banquet she gave. But all this gives me no satisfaction as long as I see that Jew Mordecai sitting at the king's gate." His wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, "Have a pole set up reaching 50 cubits, and ask the king to have Mordecai impaled on it. Then go with the king to the banquet and enjoy yourself." This suggestion delighted Haman, and he had the pole set up. That night, the king could not sleep, so he ordered the book of the Chronicles to be brought in and read to him. It was found recorded there that Mordecai had exposed Bigthana and Teresh, who had conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. "What honor has Mordecai received for this?" the king asked her. "Nothing has been done for him," his attendants answered. The next morning, Haman entered the court to request Mordecai's execution. Before Haman could speak, the king asked, "What should be done for the man the king delights to honor?" Assuming the king meant him, Haman suggested a royal robe the king had worn, a horse the king had ridden, one with a royal crest. Then let the robe and horse be entrusted to one of the king's most noble princes. Let them robe the man the king delights to honor, and lead him on the horse through the city streets, proclaiming, "This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor." To his horror, the king commanded Haman to honor Mordecai in this way. After parading Mordecai, Haman rushed home in grief, only to be summoned to Esther's second banquet. During the banquet, King Xerxes again asked Esther her request. Queen Esther answered, "If I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, grant me my life. This is my petition. And spare my people. This is my request. For I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated." King Xerxes asked, "Who is he? Where is he?" Esther said, "An adversary, an enemy, this vile Haman." Then Haman was terrified before the king and queen. The king got up in a rage and went out into the palace garden. Haman stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life. Just as the king returned, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was reclining. The king exclaimed, "Will he even harm the queen while she is with me in the house?" As soon as the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Then Harbona, one of the eunuchs, said, "A pole reaching 50 cubits stands by Haman's house. He had it set up for Mordecai." The king said, "Take him to it." So they took Haman to the pole he had set up for Mordecai. After that, the king's fury subsided. That same day, King Xerxes gave Queen Esther the estate of Haman, and Mordecai came into the king's presence, for Esther had told how he was related to her. The king took off his signet ring, which he had reclaimed from Haman, and presented it to Mordecai. Esther appointed him over Haman's estate. "For me," Esther again pleaded with the king, falling at his feet and weeping. She begged him to put an end to Haman's evil plan. Then the king extended the gold scepter to Esther, and she stood before him. "If it pleases the king," she said, "and if he regards me with favor, let an order be written overruling the dispatches that Haman devised and wrote to destroy the Jews in all the king's provinces. For how can I bear to see disaster fall on my people?" King Xerxes replied, "Because Haman attacked the Jews, I have given his estate to Esther. Now write another decree in the king's name in behalf of the Jews, as seems best to you, and seal it with the king's signet ring, for no document written in the king's name and sealed with his ring can be revoked." At once the royal secretaries were summoned. They wrote out all Mordecai's orders to the Jews and to the nobles of the 127 provinces. Mordecai wrote in the name of King Xerxes, sealed the dispatches with the king's signet ring, and sent them by mounted couriers. The king's edict granted the Jews the right to assemble and protect themselves, to destroy any armed force that might attack them. The day appointed for the Jews to do this was the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar. The couriers went out, spurred on by the king's command, and the edict was issued in the citadel of Susa. When Mordecai left the king's presence, he was wearing royal garments of blue and white, a large crown of gold and a purple robe, and the city of Susa held a joyous celebration. For the Jews it was a time of happiness and joy, gladness and honor. On the 13th day of the 12th month, the edict was to be carried out. On this day, the enemies of the Jews had hoped to overpower them. But the tables were turned, and the Jews got the upper hand. The Jews assembled in their cities and attacked those who sought to destroy them. No one could stand against them, for fear of the Jews had seized all the people. In the citadel of Susa, the Jews killed 500 men. They also killed the 10 sons of Haman, but they did not lay their hands on the plunder. The number of those killed in the citadel of Susa was reported to the king that same day. The king said to Queen Esther, "The Jews have killed 500 men and the 10 sons of Haman in the citadel of Susa. What have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now what is your petition? It will be given you." Esther answered, "Give the Jews in Susa permission to carry out this day's edict tomorrow also, and let Haman's 10 sons be put on poles, just like their father." So the king commanded that this be done. Meanwhile, the Jews in the king's provinces assembled to protect themselves and got relief from their enemies. They killed 75,000 of them, but did not lay their hands on the plunder. This happened on the 13th day of Adar, and on the 14th they rested and made it a day of feasting and joy. Mordecai recorded these events, and he sent letters to all the Jews throughout the provinces of King Xerxes to have them celebrate annually the 14th and 15th days of the month of Adar as the time when the Jews got relief from their enemies. He wrote them to observe the days as days of feasting and joy, and giving presents of food to one another and gifts to the poor. The Jews agreed to continue the celebration they had begun, doing what Mordecai had written to them. Therefore these days were called Purim, from the word pur. The Jews took it on themselves to establish the custom that they and their descendants should without fail observe these 2 days every year. These days of Purim should never fail to be celebrated by the Jews, nor should the memory die out among their descendants. King Xerxes imposed tribute throughout the empire. All his acts of power and might, together with a full account of the greatness of Mordecai, are written in the annals of the kings of Media and Persia. Mordecai the Jew was second in rank to King Xerxes, preeminent among the Jews, and held in high esteem by his fellow Jews, because he worked for the good of his people, and spoke up for the welfare of all the Jews. The life of Esther is a powerful reminder of courage and faith. Her bravery and wisdom in the face of great danger saved her people and left a lasting legacy of hope and deliverance. Through her story, we learn about the importance of standing up for what is right, even when it means risking our lives, and the incredible impact one person's courage can have on the world. Do you want your children and other families around the world to learn the Bible through animated movies? Then here's your chance to help make that happen. Our vision is to create full-length Bible movies that tell all the stories leading to Jesus, something mainstream media like Disney would never do. All of our content is free and available on YouTube, but ad revenue alone is not enough to support our mission. By joining our community on Patreon, we can together create these incredible films and spread the Bible stories to the next generation. In return, we offer you exclusive perks for your entire family. Thank you for being a part of this amazing mission. If you enjoyed this video, Please subscribe to our channel and press the bell for notifications of our newest videos. Make sure to like the video, comment your thoughts, and share it with your friends and family. Thank you for watching.